we're looking at the quadratic formula, which is a formula that can be used to solve any quadratic equation. So this is any function in the general form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. A few things to note here is a cannot be 0, and that the function has to start with everything on one side equaling 0. If this is the case, then the quadratic formula is true, and that is that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So in an equation you would locate where each of these values is, the a value, the b value, and the c value, and then you plug it into this formula and solve. So some benefits of this over the other methods that we may have looked at, such as graphing or factoring or completing the square, is that this always works, and it always works basically the same. It doesn't get too much more difficult. The only added difficulty in a problem with the quadratic formula is the numbers being bigger and you needing to use a calculator, but you don't get like more difficult on fractions necessarily or simplifying. You can probably actually solve problems more simply using it than some of the other methods that we have. So we're going to look at an example here. This one is going to start with an a value of 1, and so we're going to do x squared plus 2x minus 35 is 0. So our a value is 1, right? 1 times x squared is still x squared. It is not 0. 0 times x squared would have been 0. There'd be no x squared. Next, we have b, which is 2, and c, which is negative 35. And so now we just go and fill it in. So we have x equals negative b. So since b is positive, it is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared. This is 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 35. All over 2a, which is 1. Now in general, if a is 1, I'm not going to write the 1 most of the time. Most of the time, I know 2 times 1 is 2, and so I'm not even going to write it. The same up here with the 4 times 1 times negative 35. 4 times 1 is just 4, and so I'm not even going to worry about it. So we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 1 times negative 35. Well, 4 times 35 is 120, and 20, which is 140. And since it's minus 4ac and the c is negative, we actually get a minus and negative here, which is plus. So 4 plus 140 all over 2. This is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 144 all over 2. That's negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 144, which is 12 all over 2. And we get negative 2 plus 12. Negative 2 plus 12 is 10 over 2. Or we get negative 2 minus 12, which is negative 14 over 2. And when we simplify, we get our solutions of 5 or negative 7. Now you may have asked yourself, well, did we have to do all of this? Would there have been an easier method? And the answer is probably. Probably here we could have come up with a better method, a different way of doing this that would have worked better. So what way would have worked better? Well, x squared plus 2x minus 35 is 0. And in general, I would say it's easier to factor this, right? What two numbers multiply to negative 35 and add to 2? Well, what numbers multiply to 35? That's 7 and 5. One of them has to be negative, one has to be positive. Given that we're trying to get 2, the 7 is the bigger one, so we get x plus 7 times x minus 5 is 0. To make x plus 7 0, you get negative 7. And to get x minus 5 to 0, you get 5. And the order here doesn't really matter. Notice we get the same two terms. All right, so we're going to look at a second problem here as well. This one is going to have an a value that's not 1. And that's going to cause some other things to happen rather than just what we were just looking at. And this kind of shows why the quadratic formula works better than trying to factor or complete the square. Completing the square always works too, but sometimes that b value can get kind of messy, and this kind of already kind of starts to show that. So we have 4x squared plus 19x minus 5 is 0. And again, let's pull off our values here. So we get a is 4, b is 19, and c is negative 5. I strongly encourage that until you know the quadratic formula, you write it every time. So we get x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. From here, it's like every other time that we do it, it's just filling in our numbers. So we get negative 19 plus or minus the square root of 19 squared minus 4ac all over 2 times 4. Here it's perfectly fine to not do 2 times 4. Just plug it in as 8. That's fine as long as you know what you're doing. Just don't miss it. I've seen that happen a lot as well. So here we have negative 19 plus or minus the square root of 19 squared, which is 361. If you need a calculator, make sure that you use one. Here we have 4 times 4 times negative 5. Since it's multiplication, we can go in any order. Note that we have minus, and in the multiplication, just one negative, so this is going to be plus again. And 4 times 5 is 20, times 4 is 80. And again, we're all over 8 here. Negative 19 plus or minus the square root of 441 all over 8. Negative 19 plus or minus 21 all over 8. Negative 19 minus 21 is negative 40 over 8, and negative 19 plus 21 is 2 over 8. And so we get our reduced fractions here. 40 over 8 is negative 5, and 2 over 8 is 1/4. And that would be simplified, and we would be done.